Hey everyone, and welcome to the live and unscripted reality quilting show. I'm Susan Smith, and you're in my studio stitched by Susan. Today's project is a really fun one. There's dragons and castles and all kinds of interesting things on the quilt top. And also, I am quilting it without batting, only with a Minky style backing on it. So it's going to be a little bit different, a little bit honestly experimental for me. I don't do this terribly often either. And it is custom quilting with a bit of ruler work. So part of today, we've got some good music in the lineup because part of today I'll need to just be heads down working and paying attention to what I'm doing. So I welcome you all to chat with each other in the chat box. I intend for it to be a social function. So I'll stop every now and again and get your questions and tips, and we get to chat back and forth with each other. But when I'm quilting, feel free to carry on conversations in the chat too about the topic at hand. That would be great. So these episodes I try to air once a month, and they're always live streaming, and they're most often a client quilt. So it's not a lesson per se. And often, including today, it may be difficult to see the actual quilting stitches because of the busyness of the print and the darkness. However, it gives you a chance to see that big picture view of a whole quilt being worked on. And I talk about decisions that I'm making and choices and whys. And that can be as helpful, honestly, as learning specific quilting design. So that's what this show is about. And being live and unscripted, we don't edit it. What happens stays on air and you get to see it. So whatever things I decide I did wrong and redo, or whatever thread breaks or anything, those all stay in. So it's a reality show. It really is. Okay, do I have anything else I want to talk about before we get going? I don't think so. We'll start and we'll chat betwixt and between. Let me set my coffee cup down and we'll get started loading. So I've got my backing here, and I want to make clear too, Minky is actually a brand, and this is not Minky. It is correctly Cuddle. We just, like we say we're Googling something, we say we're using Minky backing, and Minky actually is a specific brand. I put it in my description because I knew you would know what I was talking about. You would know what I was talking about. But this is Cuddle brand, but it's like a velvety, it's got a nap. And the trick to remember about this when you're loading on the long arm is to be very aware of the stretchy quality. So lengthwise, so these are my cut ends. Lengthwise, there is not very much stretch, but from selvage to selvage, it is super stretchy. So my preference is to load the selvage top and bottom, and then I can control how tightly that is stretched with my rollers, and it remains consistent then, and I'm able to put a little tension on the sides, which I like to do to keep things smooth and flat and wrinkle free, and I can safely do that without overstretching because this is not the stretchy weave of the fabric. Also, putting this cut edge, attaching that to the side is difficult because it is so stretchy. It's really difficult to not stretch it or squunch it in because it has so much movability. So it's nice also to have that selvage for the attachment process at the beginning. So let's start to get it on. I'm using my red snapper system. Here's my snappers. So there's already a snapper rod in my hem here. It's just a little, 3/8 of an inch or so rod, and this will just snap over it. So I'm just going to line up the edge of my selvage, nice and straight. I'm going to go right a little bit more. Are we within camera there? Yes, we are. And now I'll just work my way along. You know, the fabric does still have some stretch, and the selvage almost has a bit of ripple to it. So I'm being very aware of that and not putting any tension on it. I do not want to overstretch it. Don't be scared of Minky. It's a wonderful backing. It makes a fabulous cozy quilt. Just know that the most important thing is be aware that you're working with this stretchy quality, and never forget it, right? Don't let it catch you off guard. So there's one snapper. And as you see, I just kind of place it with my left hand, hold everything in place, and then start snapping with my right. When you purchase a snapper system, if indeed you decide to go that way, it comes with small little snappers, and the company recommendation is to put those on and kind of baste it in place. I find this to be much faster, and it works well for me, but you have options. So there's my front rail. And now I've just tossed the remainder of that backing over my further rail. Those of you who are old hands here will know what I'm doing, but for those of you who are new, I do not center my quilt on my frame, and I don't measure the center of the backing or the center of the quilt top. I really don't. This is a super fast way of loading. It requires that I do have a straight edge on the front, and I know I do because it's a selvage in this case, right? And now when I toss it over the rails, I am taking care that it's not veering to the right or veering to the left. It's going straight over. And now I'll be able to roll it up and it will pull on straight. And then I'll clip at the other end and I'm good to go. It's really, really quick and really efficient. And it's not that you don't have to do anything to keep your quilt flat and square. You still have to be aware of your fabric going straight and things like that. But it is certainly faster than squaring up a whole big backing or marking center points on all your pieces. So again, I just make sure that that is all flowing straight over the back of my machine. And then I begin to roll. Now again, this is my stretchy direction, right? So we're seeing that play into how this is wanting to roll up a little, and I'm getting ripples in here. Can you see that? So all I'm going to do is stop from time to time, smooth things out, double check that it's rolling on possibly can. One more check. You can almost see there's a nick in the cut of the fabric here. This is one of the things I love about this method of loading is I don't have to worry about straightening up the other 3 edges. I only need one straight edge. So that bit, that's just going to get trimmed off in the excess and I don't have to worry about it at all when it comes to loading or even preparation for loading. I do a lot more teaching now than I do quilting, but I used to turn out a lot of quilts. And so being able to save 10 minutes in prep time for each quilt was significant. And so that's when I started developing this way of loading, when every minute really mattered. All right. Again, I'm just smoothing this out to make sure that it's laying flat, neither overstretched nor eased in. And then I keep a magnet, I think you can see it, on this side of my frame, and I just drop it on that backing to hold it in place so it can't slip. It already slipped at this other end, so I'm going to pull it back a little bit. And I'll show you how I do a bit of a double check on this after I get it finished loading. Because now I've messed with it a little bit, right, by pulling it over that rail. And so I need to double check that it is in fact straight and even. But remember, I do have a selvage on both sides. So I can be pretty confident that if I load my selvage straight with the hemline on this side, that I do in fact have my batting not askew. It's nice and straight too. Okay, now let's go back, flip this one over. Let's see how flat it lays. Okay, good example for you guys. Object lesson. It is quite loose and floppy at this end and more snug at this end. But because I had selvage on both sides, I can be pretty sure that that's just a process of my rolling it on because of the stretchy quality of the fabric, that it's rolled unequally at one end. There's an easy fix for that. I'm literally going to roll it back onto my first roller. And that's only about half of it, but I can already see this is more even. And so now I'll turn my bottom roller back on, roll it back onto that one. And you can do this with cotton fabrics too. If you've got, for example, a pieced backing that's not quite laying flat, rolling it back and forth once or even twice will really help to even out anything that's been eased. But now we have a nice even top. Perfect. No batting today, so I will just grab the quilt and we'll be on our way. Here is the quilt. Mr. Producer says, hold it up to the camera. It actually goes the other way, but let me hold this up first so you can see it. Can you see that? Lots of fun stuff going on in this one. It actually goes this way. So I made this decision on the floor of my sewing room last night. I laid out the cuddle backing and I laid out my quilt, and I was able to use fabric efficiently if I had with the fabric for the length of the quilt. Now my personal thinking is I don't really care which way that stretchy part goes on the finished quilt. I only care about how it works when I'm quilting it. And so often when I'm quilting a project, I will purposely load the quilt sideways because there's fewer wider passes. But in this case, I'm loading it lengthways because that now fits with having my selvage on my backing fabric, top and bottom. I hope you followed all of that, but that's how my train of thought goes when I'm deciding which way my quilt is going to be oriented here. And I'm going to leave a little bit more space at the top than I sometimes do because I know I'm going to be handling rulers a little bit, and I want a bit of space for them not to be bumping that edge. Perfect. All right, so I've loaded my machine. This is Stella. Stella is a Bernina Q24, and I've loaded her with a 40 weight, 100% poly thread. That is my personal preference for quilting and the one I use the most often. So it's kind of in a teal color. And on the bottom, I've got also 100% poly thread, but it's by Wonderfil brand, and it's a 80 weight, which is quite a bit thinner, which is lovely because then you have more yards on your bobbin. But I happen to have pre-filled bobbins from Wonderfil that are almost identical in color to this teal. So what a great opportunity to use that. So the first thing I'm going to do is baste around the edge. Now I've already got my, if you look on the close-up, Dave, I've already got my ruler foot loaded because I know that I am going to do some ruler work today. And so this has the wider profile to use against a ruler. I often just keep this foot on for everything. There's no particular reason not to. So for today, especially because I know I'm going to be doing ruler work, I've just started out with that.
Okay, those eyes are creepy on the camera view.
The eyes are. They look kind of lit from within, don't they? They're not quite as vivid in real life. That's funny. I am basting this with a 1/4 inch stitch. I have that option on my Bernina machine, but you absolutely could just use your regular quilting stitch too. But I like to establish square, straight edges and 90-degree corners before I do any quilting. This to me, you know, again, if you've been coming here for a long time, you already know this about me. But in case some of you are newer, I consider basting the perimeter of the quilt as I go to be a non-negotiable. I always baste this outside edge because it establishes the size and shape of your quilt. In one of my courses, just for fun, I took a little 8-inch square of fabric and I did a little sample side by side of one that I basted first and then quilted the interior. And then another example that was the same size where I just started in one corner and quilted it. And across that 8 inches, it changed size by about a 1/4 inch. Like it just pulls in when you're quilting, right? Especially if you have fluffy batting in there. So all that to say, this is how you preempt that distortion. You baste it. You establish the straight edges and square corners before you ever start putting in pretty quilting. So I always, always, always baste before I quilt. I happen to be eyeballing the straight edges. You can, if you have channel locks or some way to lock your machine into straight vertical or horizontal lines, you can absolutely use that too. So I just baste as far as I can go toward my front rails. And when I advance the quilt, then I'll baste the edges again, the right and left sides. Okay, so that's done. Now, We really need to put a bit of tension on this quilt on both sides. And typically what I use is my little, these are by the Red Snapper People too, and they're little edge clamps. But what they have is a teeny tiny channel. It's less than 1/8 of an inch that the fabric has to slide into. So I'm guessing that is not going to work well with Minky. Not because it's thicker than 1/8 of an inch, but it's got this curled cut edge. So I'm not going to stress too much about it. Instead, I'm going to use my clamps. Now, I'm not putting a ton of tension on. There's really not much more than the weight of that clamp. And though I have an elastic strap, I'm only going to pull it snug. I am not going to pull it tight. I don't want to have a pull at one clamp and a pull at the next clamp. I just want it to be smooth. That one's a little too tight. Let's loosen it up a touch. There we go. So you can see my straight edge is not distorted at all. It's just enough pull to keep that beautifully flat. These may seem like fiddly things if you're not used to doing them, but trust me, one of my mother's famous sayings, she had a saying for everything, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and this is a good example of that. Basting and putting a little tension on those outside edges will save you wrinkles on the back and a lot of frustration. If that happens, it is a hair puller, believe me. Okay, now we've got our quilt basically basted on the outside edge. Now we get to get some of the fun decisions. A story about Pauline, whose quilt it is. Pauline and I go way back, probably to my mid-20s maybe when I first met Pauline. And of course, I grew up in the wilds of northern Canada. Many of you know that. And so she was the first person I met who had like a floor to ceiling wall of cabinets filled with fabric. And so I have Pauline to thank for showing me what's really possible. Anyway, she got me started on this addiction. But Pauline asked for a couple of things on this quilt. One was no batting, right? We've already addressed that. And within the pictorial bits, I'm just going to free motion something that kind of outlines them and shows off a bit of the details. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch in the ditch around the blocks to kind of frame them. So even when you look at it from the back, you'll see a bit of the frames where those blocks are, the castle, the dragon, etc. Excuse me. And then between, there's quite a lot of area where there's different prints, but I'm going to do more like an edge-to-edge design that just fills in. So I guess edge-to-edge wouldn't qualify, but an all-over-y type fill that just fills in between all those spaces. So when I can, I'll outline a block and then move right into that fill to move to the next block just to save thread breaks. However, just know that if you're worried about, shall I break thread or not, like it doesn't matter. Do whatever's convenient for you. There's no rules, in my opinion, about all of that. However, I do want to get set up for ruler quilting now, and there are a couple things that I need. One is the ruler foot, which I've already showed you, has the higher profile, and the other is a ruler plate. Now, in different brands of machines, this may look a little different. Some are metal or wooden. This one is acrylic and see-through, but all it is it gives me a broader surface on which to set my ruler. Otherwise, this little tiny long arm nose, my ruler will rock and be unstable on there. So, should have done this before I put the elastics on, but we'll get it. Mine just snaps into place. And much like the ruler foot, I can leave this on. The only reason that I typically don't is I don't do a lot of ruler work, and it does reduce how close I can come to my front rail by almost 3 inches. So it reduces my throat space. So when I'm not doing ruler work, I take it off. Even in certain areas in a quilt, if I'm not going to do ruler work for a while, I'll take it off because it gives me that bigger depth of throat space. But know that that's just personal preference. And then the ruler that I'm going to use today is by Quilter's Apothecary, Jamie Wallen. I bet many of you know him. I love Jamie's rulers because I love this angled handle. It just gives me multiple ways to grasp it. So on all my YouTube channels, I keep links for some of my favorite stuff that I use, and these rulers are there, including a discount code if you happen to want some of these rulers too. And they come in different lengths and sizes, but Jamie's got a little collection named after me, the Stitched by Susan collection of straight rulers, because I love them so much. Okay, a few decisions. I'm thinking here. It's not just empty wheels turning. I am thinking here. I want to outline these blocks with edge stitch, but I don't necessarily want to outline the border, right? The border, like these, changes and is a different fabric from time to time. Sometimes the eyes, sometimes the crystals. There's like dragon scales elsewhere. So I'm not going to stitch in the ditch of this border. I'm only going to stitch in the ditch of the blocks. So I'm actually going to buzz my quilt forward a little bit so that I can do this first row of blocks. And here's why. Because I'm going to be stopping and starting and moving around a little bit with my quilting, I should stabilize this area in some way, and I have two choices. One would be to run a basting line across, and I could do that as I work my way down the quilt. I absolutely could. But another way is to use my stitching in the ditch to stabilize these areas, and then they're fixed, and then I can fill between them. I can even roll my quilt back and forth if I want to, and nothing's going to move out of place, right? So that's my personal choice. That's what I'm going to do. That a little bit more. I'll move my elastics just a touch. Okay, we're in business. I like to start with kind of a central one and then work my way out, kind of dividing and conquering. Where shall we start? And for those of you who use Berninas, I use BSR2 when I'm working with the ruler, because that means when I stop moving my machine, my needle stops moving. It's not coasting at all. And I like that when I'm doing ruler work because it stops and stays right where I am. Someone is asking about magnets. Is someone asking, Dave?
Oh, yeah.
So let me talk about this. Usually, I would, at this point, put magnets all along the front of the quilt. And I absolutely could, but I think the purpose of the magnet is to keep the quilt from pulling up and distorting. But my stitching in the ditch is also going to do that, right? It's going to fix these large areas. I guess I could still possibly see some pullage here. So, okay, fine. You guys win. I'll put magnets on. But I'll tell you, I often would cut that corner. I would just do my basting, my stabilizing, and work my way down the quilt. Anyway, they're on. Do you feel better? And after I get a couple of these blocks stitched in the ditch, we'll stop and chat for a minute, and I'll get a sip of my magic elixir, and on we'll go. So I did mention it's going to be really tough to see the actual stitching on these fabrics because they're busy and because they're dark. But when I say stitching in the ditch, what I'm doing is stitching on the down side, the lower side of seams that have been pressed to one side. Does that make sense? So the seam is a little higher. There's a hill on one side. There's a ditch on the other. And if you're able to stitch in that ditch, the stitching almost disappears, but you get a nice definition that's framing whatever it is, in my case, a dragon. Cut my tails, my thread tails before I get back there. And just as an added security, when I get back around to where I began on this square, I will actually stitch a little bit over those first stitches. It's just one more level of security, even though I did do a lock stitch too. Right here. Perfect. That is not going anywhere. By the way, I am armed for quilting today. I've got my trusty shirt that says, "My machine is calling and I must sew." And we're starting to get fall, cooler weather. And so the barefoot gal, Mr. Producer's going to show you. I know he is. Look what the barefoot gal is wearing today. Oh, hang on. He's got to get his camera ready. Oh. Uh-oh, the camera died. Anyway, I'm wearing my fluffy booties today because it is a little chilly. A little chilly. We have, I think, 5 cameras connected today on the hook. So it's funny. Law of averages just seems to be at least one of them will just mysteriously turn off. Power down. It probably gets tired of waiting for us and just puts its head down and goes to sleep. I don't know. Seems to happen quite often. There is no chance that I will finish this quilt during this episode today, but we will probably stay on for 2 hours-ish. So knowing that, please feel free to get your own beverage and snack and your own project to be working on. On this big square, it is large enough that I will not be able to sew the perimeter in my throat space. So again, I have choices, 2 choices. One is to sew part of it and then with my needle down, roll my quilt forward and sew the rest of it. Other choice is to just do half of it now and do half of it later. Doesn't really matter which one. You just get to pick your druthers. I'm going to choose to do half now and later because then I don't have to take my magnets off and my elastic straps and so forth. But either way would work. So again, I'm using Isacord brand, 40 weight, 100% polyester thread in the top, and 80 weight Wonderfill Deco Bob thread in the bottom. I've got my stitch length set at 10. I do have my stitch regulator on. Pretty much always do when I'm doing ruler work. It's just easier. This one you can see that ditch stitching a little bit, right? Can you see how stitching on that lower edge is what I'm aiming for? And it just tucks right in there, but really adds a nice frame. And can you see me at the side? Not quite. My clamp. Oh yeah, Mr. Producer can move this camera from his chair. He has the power. Right here. See how my clamp, here's my ruler plate. It's right next to the clamp and it's going to hit it. The way I'm going to fix that is put my trusty yardstick under that will lift that clamp a little bit. I don't know if I can lift it enough. I'm going to try to be able to slide right under it with my ruler. Otherwise, I would just take that clamp off while I'm working in this little side area. That would be an option too. Look at that, slid right under it. Perfect. I hoisted it up quite a bit in order to be able to do that. And just know that I could not do that and also stitch way over there. Like if that fabric is hoisted up where I'm stitching, I'll get skip stitches most likely. But because I'm several inches away, where I'm stitching is still resting on my trusty little table. So I can kind of get away with that. Oh, now I'm hitting the other one. I've got it lifted up over. Okay, now I didn't even anchor my thread there. I'm just going to stop, and when I come back around and stitch the bottom edge, I will overlap it a bit, and I just leave a few thread tails there, about 1 inch long, so I can see it when I come back around. Okay, let's go do one at the other end, and then we'll stop for a second and have a wee chat. And coffee. Those of you who have been in my world for a while and know a lot of the designs that I tend to lean on with free motion quilting, what do you think is a good choice for doing the fill between these blocks? I'm curious to see if any of you land on the one that I landed on, and in fact, to see if any of you come up with a better idea than I had, because I could still change. I already have a design in mind for all the fill between these blocks, but I'll see what you guys think. Mr. Producer, do you want to put a poll in? Is that easiest? It takes a minute, but we can't do a poll because that's kind of a yes/no answer or an A/B answer. So just type it in the chat if you have some ideas for what to do for fills. Okay, there's all my blocks. I'm going to back up my quilt again so that I can reach all the way to the top. That should do it. I think you guys were wise with the magnets because even here, I have not actually stitched across here, right? I've just done that U-shaped top, so it's wisdom to put them on there. Not get any awkward pulling. We don't want that. Okay, now I'm going for my coffee, and then we have questions or comments or quilting design suggestions. Oop. Let's move Stella out of the way a little bit.
So we have a few. I'm just going to go through the questions, and then I have the one we're going to talk about.
I forgot to say, and I will say it now because we sometimes get a lot of chatting happening. If you put a QQ in front of your question, we can run a search for all of those and not miss them in the chatter. That is so helpful. Margaret, the Hexie's quilt on the wall is lovely. There must be a story behind it. Oh gosh, yes, there is, Margaret. I won't make it super long, but a friend of mine, an online friend, I've never met her in real life, she has an organization that helps women in Honduras make a business of either sewing quilt tops like this or prepping hexies and sewing kits. So I bought this completed quilt top made by a lady in Honduras, and I quilted it. So you can get more of the story and you can see the quilting on some earlier live and unscripted episodes. Certainly it has the word hexie in it. I'm not sure what to tell you exactly to search for in title, but it'll have the word hexie in it, and I quilted this on air. It's a stunning quilt in real life. Love it. Dave will try and find it for you and add a link. Kayla quilts. My leader grips don't like Minky. One broke a little bit from attempting to load with them. I've not broken one doing it, Kayla, but it's just frustrating to try and get the Minky to go in there, especially when I've got that stretchy edge there. It doesn't seem worth it to me. So I know. Okay, I see that one, and I'll come back to it. Back to Kayla's comment. I know there are quilters that do all kinds of nifty hacks for that. Like you could actually baste a strap of fabric on the edge of the quilt backing that you could load into that leader. Like there's all kinds of ways you can hack it, but for my purposes, using my elastic stretchy bits answers what I need them for and is not fussy, and so that's the way I choose to go with it. And Tracy was asking, do I need the magnets even without batting? Less so, Tracy, because there's less pull up, because there's less bulk, right, in the layers. However, it's a safeguard. It's pretty easy. I did it. So, Jean, can you explain again? Do you press to the side with the pressed seams or to the other side? Well, yes, and I realize you're asking this relative to stitching in the ditch. So someone else made this quilt top, Jean, my friend Pauline, and she pressed all of her seams to the side. And typically, in most of these, she pressed away from the block and toward the backing. Not in all cases. So when I come across a seam where it's the backing that's the ditch, then I can make the choice. Do I want to slip over and stitch on that ditch, or do I want to stay within the block and stitch on the hill? And I can tell you already, I'm going to choose to stay within the block. It's not that one is wrong or right, but you just have to pick one or the other.
So there's lots of answers on your poll. I'll get to those.
Okay.
But this is a Joan one, and she asked a question, and I'm going to just stick a whole bunch of the answers on the screen. So you just get to read them.
Okay. So what we're doing is someone asked a question or Joan asked the question?
From Joan. You'll understand.
Okay. Mr. Producer's going to put some stuff on the screen and we're going to kind of read it together, apparently. Here we go. Here we go. I'm rolling with it, he tells me. All right, Joan. Chime in with things we've learned from Susan on Live and Unscripted. Aw, Joan, you're the best. Joan coined the word Susanisms, and every so often she has trotted out Susanisms to me. I need a Dave. For real is using red snappers and red E edge grips. Okay. Jeffrey, the importance of basting. Oh, good. I'm glad that message has sunk in. Sabita, confidence in free motion quilting. I love it. How to baste, fix floppy quilts, and so much more. Joan, spritzing a crease with water to make even stubborn wrinkles disappear. Doesn't work on my face, though. No, dang it, it doesn't, Joan. I've tried. Austin A. Loading method is genius. I hated centering and squaring everything. Also, I'm impatient and like to do things quickly. Me too. I'm sure that's why I tried another way in the first place. Jan, so many things. Loading, magnets, basting, to name a few. Oh, you guys are wonderful. Tammy, I now have magnets like Susan uses. Hardware store genius. Forgotten important one. Spritzing. Yes, spritzing backing, which I didn't have to do today because cuddle fabric does not get creases like cotton does.
There's a few more later.
Okay.
Play those later.
Enough of those. Enough of those. I feel good about myself now.
These are answers
Okay, so now answers are coming up for my ask about what pattern should I quilt as a fill between these blocks. Ribbon Candy from Jill. Flames for fills. Ooh, flames is a good one. A fan pattern that looks like dragon scales. I did consider dragon scales. Austin, I bet she's using fire. I forget what she calls it. Flames, you know, same difference. Water design movement, that would work too. Yep, yep. Flames. Ribbon Candy Wishbone or piano keys. Okay, now remember, I'm moving like this between blocks, right? That's what I'll be doing with it. Scales would be cool and could be done way smaller than flames. Yep, true. A fan feather. You guys have good ideas. Maybe a cobblestone? That's a good one. Similar to the castle stonework, a Baptist fan. Carla knows my lingo. Continuous boxes? That's a good one too. Clamshells might look more like scales than a fan. So again, I'm filtering all of these through the knowledge that I have to move in every direction around my boxes, right? Baptist fans look like dragon flames. Yep, they do a little bit. Spirals with a hook? Absolutely doable. That's an easy one to move around with.
Okay.
Is that about it?
Yeah, so this is important.
This is important. This is answering Joan. Okay.
The best answer to date. If I could give her a prize, I would.
We'd give you a prize if we could. Shannon, it doesn't have to be perfect. So good. Okay, this is a great time to insert, you guys. I'm doing something totally new to me. And not this weekend, but next. I'm a vendor. I have a booth at our local quilt show in Spokane, Washington. So if you're anywhere nearby and want to come and support me, that would be great. But my point is, I've deliberated over whether to do it because what I'm selling is my teaching, my online courses, my membership, my method of quilting, if you will. I don't have product to sell in a booth, but my message in my booth is going to be a great big banner that says, you can do it. Because that's really my message. That's kind of my why, is to show quilters you don't have to have a long arm like I have necessarily. And I'm going to be there with domestic machines because I'm not taking a long arm to the booth. I don't have one extra to take. And showing that you can do it. Whatever your equipment level, even whatever your skill level, there is something that you can quilt. And you can be happy, Shannon, starting as a kindergartner and working your way up. It's all good. Okay, Kathy, loops and stars. Bubbles or circles, which is kind of the cobblestone effect, right?
I like the loops and stars. There you go.
Okay, so that's you guys' answers. I'm happy to report that none of you hit on my idea. Haha, I feel very original. I think what I'm going to do is boomerang. And I don't know if all of you know that one. It's one that I teach in my membership. And it's kind of like my all over feathers, except instead of being rounded like paisley shapes, they're pointed. They have 3 sharp points on them. So they're a bit scalish. And one of the beauties is they're super easy to move around in every direction. So while I loved the visual of lots of your designs like fans or scales set behind these blocks, yet if I was doing scales, then what would I do when I needed to work my way up? Do you know what I mean? It's not as easy to quilt in every direction. So I'm sticking with my idea, which is boomerang. And we're going to start doing that right now so you can see it. In case you don't know what that design is, you will get to see it. Now that I've stabilized my bits, I'm actually going to take my one elastic off and we're going to see how the first pass goes. I think that I could feel if there were any wrinkles in it. I'll leave the bottom elastic on just because it's harder when doing an edge-to-edge design to like remember to move that when you get close to it, and then you'll end up getting a bonk if you don't and a funny joggle. So I'll come down and start at your end where you guys can see better.
You can do either end. You're on the close up. So.
I'm going to go ahead and switch to my BSR 1, which means I still have stitch regulation on, but there's coasting. I'll show you. Even when I'm holding still, see that? My needle still goes. That helps to get really nice sharp points on these boomerangs because there's often one extra stitch in the point while I'm kind of pausing a little bit. Okay, here we go. I know it's going to be crazy hard for you to see the actual stitching. At some point we'll stop and try and do a nice close-up for you so you can see this. But like I said, this is exactly the movement pattern of my all over feathers. It's just 3-pointed shapes instead of that paisley shape. But in terms of how I travel and move around and build the design, it's exactly like the all over feathers. And I'm doing it in a fairly fine scale. Again, because I need to have that freedom to move, and some of these spaces are tight for turning corners. And I think this will look really interesting on the back of the quilt. Mr. Producer is trying to get a handheld camera that he can get way closer in, and you can see more details of this. No, I think it's best just to wait, Dave, and there will be some other fabrics, like for example the spooky eyes, but they're on a solid black background, so it will show up much better then than it does on this super busy fabric. We'll get there. We'll get there. And there's lots of decisions I haven't made yet. I tend to be a on-the-fly decision maker. Things like the castle that's below me here. You know, once I've outlined the castle, there's quite a bit of sky, for example, around it. What am I going to quilt in that? Chances are I'm going to quilt something cloudy and sort of loose in that, but I haven't fully decided, so we'll see when we get there. I wonder if I could come down this center bit. I bet I could. Down and back up, all in a 3-inch space. Let's see if I can do it. So here I am in this little narrow 3-inch space. So the decision I'm trying to make is, am I able to quilt all the way down this space toward me and then back up this space and keep traveling along? Or do I need to break thread? And I can see already, I'm not going to be able to make anything like a graceful design. Skinny, skinny, skinny going down and skinny, skinny, skinny going back up. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill it up, working my way down. I'll break thread. Like, obviously, thread breaks and stops and starts are not going to show in this fabric. So no worries about that, and it only takes a second to do it. By the way, I invited Pauline to watch the show this morning. I don't know if she's here or not, but if you are, Pauline, introduce yourself in the comments. Maybe people want to ask you questions about how you constructed this quilt top, because I don't think Pauline had a pattern for it. I think this was very much devised on the fly. As we get a little further, you'll see that there's a nest of dragon eggs, and they are individually pieced and set into a block to look like they're in a nest. That's going to be quite fun to try and make a nest out of that. But Pauline had the first challenge, which was piecing it into a nest, and now I'll try and quilt it to look like a nest. I'm not grabbing my bobbin thread, and I don't know why. It must have gotten cut too short. Let's have a peek. It's actually pulled out of my bobbin casing. What's going on? Interesting, it was stitching just fine, but it actually, when I open it up, I can see that it was wrapped once around the post of the bobbin case, so I have taken it out. and put it back in properly. Again, I'm using today the pre-wound bobbins from Wonderful. They're called Deco Bob, and they have an 80 weight thread in them, which I've had pretty good success quilting with, and it's lovely to have, you know, that extra yardage that fits onto one bobbin. It seems to last forever. And it's still not there? What is going on? What is going on? Pull a bit longer tail this time. See if that helps. I get asked fairly often if the Isacord thread that I use is the same as embroidery thread, because if you go and look at their website, all you'll find is Isacord is embroidery thread, and in fact it is. It was designed for embroidery machines, commercial machines like that embroider your hat and your logo on your apron and things like that. But all the same features that make it good for that. It's a little bit glossy, it's strong, it's, you know, it responds well to high speeds. That all makes it good for long arm quilting too. I'm just going to take a second and cut my thread tails because I will forget they're there because I so can't see them. And then Pauline will get her quilt back and it will have a little fringe of tails here and there. Oh, you guys, good thing I'm paying attention here. Should be doing less talking. Actually, this block needs this background in it too, right? I'm forgetting that. I'm thinking I just want to quilt this little channel with my fill, which there you can see it. But actually, I want to fill in this block. It was only this tiny area. Okay, so I need to pay more attention here. But I'm still right close by here, so I'm just going to buzz around and fill it right now. I'm just going to make sure I cross over that seam line here and there so that it doesn't look like they're all in a row, our little boomerangs. Perfect. Okay, here again, this is all fill. So I can extend my reach over into that too as I'm doing these boomerangs. I just need to pause every so often and get my bearings and make sure that I'm aware of where I'm heading. But by and large, this fill goes quite quickly as compared to, say, doing bubbles. We did talk about that, and I do think bubbles would be very pretty because they would look like cobblestones, but they take time. They take quite a bit of time to quilt, and there's a fair bit of area. And there's also a fair bit of thread buildup on them, so I don't necessarily love doing wide expanses. Now, I suppose one solution would be to simply do larger bubbles. That would have been an option. I love the flame idea, by the way, and I think I probably would have changed to that, except for the fact that it's harder to move around in all directions. When I quilt flames anyways, they tend to go from side to side on my quilting area. I don't make them head in all four directions, so I suppose you could do that, but that would take some thinking and planning beforehand. And the way it's kind of programmed into my brain at this point, it definitely moves from side to side. So it would be trickier to tuck into all these little corners. Perhaps here you're able to see a little bit of these shapes that I'm quilting. Maybe. I'm curious how many of you have made a quilt or quilted a quilt before that does not have batting in it. I've not done a lot, but a few of them. I see them more often even than with Minky. I see it done with fleece. And it's often a person who either their internal thermostat runs hot, or they live in the South and they want something that is just simply lighter weight, more coverlet-like. And it actually works quite well. Now we've gotten to the spooky eye part. If you're not weirded out by the eyes, you will at least be able to see the quilting here. I don't think I even mentioned my thread color. I'm using a teal, a fairly dark, one of the darker shades that's in the quilt for the quilting. And I think I'm probably going to use it everywhere, even in the background of some of these pictorial blocks, because it blends pretty nicely with all the colors. Those of you who have quilted all over feathers, can you see how, though the effect of this design is so different from feathers, yet my path of moving around the quilt is exactly the same as what I used for the all over feathers. And if you have not quilted all over feathers but want to, I do have a free class showing how to do that, and it breaks it down step by step by step. So there is a link already to that in the description below this video. It's called the All Over Feather class. It is free, although you have to go through an enrollment so that you get a login, and then you can go back to it as often as you want to. I should mention one other thing before I get to the edge here and we take another break. I am hosting a workshop this coming Tuesday, October 14, and it'll be at 4 p.m. Pacific time. The cost is $39, and this workshop, I call it Stitch Clinic, and it's based on an ebook that I wrote, which was a compilation of all the tips I've ever learned and collected for adjusting tension or stitch formation, or just tips for getting better, prettier stitches. So this is going to be a 60-minute workshop. I'm going to practice, because I'm determined to get it done in 60 minutes. I'm going to pack it with as many details as I can think of about how to evaluate your stitching and how to determine, like, is the problem, if you're having one, is it tension or is it something else? Because there are a lot of things that factor into how stitches are formed. For example, one of them that you might not immediately think of is the tension of your quilt. If you're working at a long arm, like how tightly it's stretched, that can have a massive effect. And we think of the problem as tension, but it's really not. Anyway, so that's kind of how that workshop will run. And my plan is, I'm kind of rolling out something new, but my plan is to deliver a workshop every month live. And replays are included. By the next day, the replay will be available. so you can come back to it as often as you want to. And it's included in the price. There's nothing additional for that. And there is one bonus for attending live, and that is that after I've delivered the workshop, I will hang around for a question and answer period. That will not be in the replay and is only available for those that attend live. So if that is something that you'd like some help with, I'm also going to give out that same little ebook that I began from as a resource. It's just a collection. It's not original stuff to me necessarily, but it's all the tips I've ever collected, things to check for, adjustments on your machine, equipment on your machine, things like that, everything that affects stitch formation. So that little ebook will be yours to keep too. Let's see. Is there a link for that, Dave? Oh boy, I don't think I thought of putting that in the description. Sorry? Mr. Producer, he's a genius. He went and got a link and put it in the chat. I will go back after we go off air and put it in the description. So if you're watching this as a replay, it should be in the description below the show. It is going to be aired. A few people have asked this. It is going to be aired on YouTube. It just will be a private session, so you can only get in with a ticket. And we'll see how that platform works. Again, this is the first one in what I hope will be a series. And so if we have any troubles with YouTube, we'll look for another platform. For example, if YouTube fills it up with ads, we'll see how that goes. Okay, we've got one pass largely done. I have not quilted inside the blocks yet. Gosh, that looks good. It does not have the heft, the definition of quilting, but it looks really good. And we'll soon be able to roll it and see it on the backing, and that's going to look cool on that cuddle backing. So let's do a quick sum up before we take questions, in case someone is just tuning in. I'm working on a quilt with a couple of unique features. Chiefly, I don't have batting behind this quilt. It's just a cuddle velvety type backing. And those two layers are what I'm stitching together. It's light custom in that I've been just in the last few minutes doing this fill in the background areas, just moving around everywhere. But each of the pictorial blocks are outlined, and there will be some detail quilted in each of those. And as we move down the quilt, there's some fun things like a nest of dragon eggs and things like that. So I'm working at Stella, my Bernina Q24, and I have Isocord 100% poly 40 weight thread loaded on the top, 100% poly 80 weight thread in the bobbin on the bottom. Both of them are a dark teal color. I'm using Jamie Wallen's Quilter's Apothecary ruler, which I just love. That's kind of a summary of that. Oh yes, and I'm wearing my machine is calling and I must sew shirt. No. What else am I wearing? Oh yeah, my booties. Oh look, Dave got the camera on. Yes, my fluffy booties. I love them. Brings whole new meaning to like get your booty on. Okay, I'm gonna grab my coffee cup. We're gonna talk for a minute. Let's see. What have we got to say?
I'm getting there. I'm just looking for cameras.
Okay. While Dave does that, he's messing around with cameras. Oh, Donna, how can you see what you're quilting? Donna says. With great difficulty, Donna, let me tell you. But it is easier for me here in real life close to the quilt than it is for you on the camera. Somehow the camera, I don't know, just with exposure, it's never quite as easy to see on the camera as it is in real life. So I'm doing okay. I've got my eyes in. I've got my contacts in this morning. Wendy, interesting that you're using 80 weight in the bobbin. Won't that fine weight sink into the Minky and almost disappear? It really looks the same, Wendy, as a 40 weight does on the back. It still creates that defined quilting line on the Minky. I've done it before and I've not been unhappy with it. I think it works well. And I happen to have, like I said, some pre-wound bobbins that Wonderful gave me that are this lovely teal color. So I thought great opportunity to use them. Adele, if at all possible, I'd like to see the back of the quilt at some point. We will, Adele. I'll get some of the detail in these blocks. I may even just roll forward and start outlining some things, and I really want to get to the egg nest, which is a little ways down. So as I roll, we'll get a handheld camera and we'll get out and show you some of the back of the quilt. Susan Berry, is the higher the thread number, the thinner the thread. That is correct, Susan. And that's one of the things I'll talk about in my workshop is what adjustments, if any, you need to make for those changes. Nadia, I would have to put painter's tape on the panels to have a stopper and not racing on them with the filler. And it may come to that for me too, Nadia. I went the opposite way. I wasn't catching all the areas that I needed to quilt. That would be another great use for blue painter's tape, is to, put down an outline and then just quilt right up to that. Yeah, good tip. Martha, I've done several Minky quilts with a big piece of flannel between because the batting and Minky together seem so heavy. It works well. Yes, and isn't it lovely that we have options depending on the resulting quilt that we want to get? We at home, as we have winters here, we love quilts with batting and Minky type fabric. They're so cozy, but not everyone does, so it's lovely that we have choices. Joan, let Susan know at one point I made up a list of 27 Susanisms I had picked up from the Live and Unscripted, so I'll refrain from listing them all here. She knows I'm her number one fan. I appreciate you, Joan, so much. Okay, speaking of fanning, though, let me just say this. YouTube, of course, is a free resource, and we love that. You just have to pay for it by watching ads or buying Prime, one or the other. Anyway, if, though, you are interested in supporting the show, there's a couple ways to do that, and one is to use YouTube's Super Chat, where you can make a donation. I think, is there a suggested amount or a minimum amount? I don't know, but I think it's $5. So you can do that, and we'll give a wave and a thank you here while we're on air if you choose to. But what I recommend, because you get more value for it, is I do have a monthly subscription membership, and I call it Advance. Not because it's such advanced quilting, but because it's helping you to advance your skills. Every month I put out 2 new lessons. Sometimes they're me, occasionally it's a guest teacher, but it's something to do with machine quilting, usually free motion quilting, sometimes custom, sometimes new all over designs, could be all kinds of different things. But that is $12.97 a month, and you can cancel anytime. There's no particular minimum. But that's your better value, is to get into that membership. And then there's a wealth. I think we're over 100 lessons accumulated now since the time I started it, of different topics and quilting designs in there. So when you join, it's not just you get started today with new lessons. When you join, the whole membership is open for you. You have access to everything that's in that membership while you're a current member. So that's a great option too. And that link is always below these episodes for you. Okay, any more questions or comments?
No.
That's it? Wow.
Yes, I do have one actually. This came in.
Debbie, have you had to adjust your tension with no batting? I have not, Debbie. I did adjust my bobbin slightly for that lighter weight thread, but I've not changed my tension dials at all. It's a super question. I don't know if any of you saw this on Instagram yesterday. I posted a tiny video. I had been on Facebook in the morning, and someone was asking in a Bernina group about how often we need to be adjusting the tension on our machines. Like, she was asking, do you do it with every quilt? Do you do it with every bobbin change? Do you do it every time you change thread type? When? What's appropriate? And so I answered her a little bit, and then I talked about my upcoming workshop, because this is something I want to talk about. I think these are one of those questions that you don't typically see when you go to a quilting class, because your teacher will be teaching a design or a pattern or a something. And this is kind of getting into the weeds, talking about adjusting tension and how to do it and when. So that's part of the workshop reasoning too. I think that this is a needed discussion. So I'm trying to fill in that gap. Okay. I do want to say one other thing, because I'm drinking coffee. Last week, we were in Canada visiting family. And this is far north, you guys, but our niece and her husband operate 2 coffee kiosks, which are the first ones ever in the town we come from, because of the ridiculous cold winters. I don't know how they do it in the wintertime, but anyway, they have this pair of coffee kiosks that they both operate. And Jess, our niece, goes live she started on TikTok, but now she streams it on YouTube too. Many hours a week, something like 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. And it's this kind of commuter sort of chatter. She's lively and bubbly and energetic. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, Dave's going to put a link, but her channel is called Station Nation. I'm a teeny bit jealous. In a year's time, she hit 100,000 subscribers. Pretty crazy. But she has hundreds of thousands of people that watch her on other, more social media channels, because she's live right now. So open another tab, stay here, but go and watch Jess and give her a high five and say, Aunt Susan.
I like when some nerd candies.
But she's just great. If you're driving and just want to listen to her chatter, she's just a sweetheart. She's upbeat, and she's just serving people coffee and chatting. In fact, we drove through her kiosk and bought our coffees on the way home while she was live. And Dave, of course. Let's give Mr. Producer a pat on the back. She was having a problem with her hot water dispenser. And don't you know, Dave parked, got out of the car, and went inside, fixed her hot water dispenser while she was live. Anyway, good story. But Station Nation, give Jess a follow if you're interested in listening to that kind of thing. And it is really fun while you're driving. Okay, putting my coffee aside, getting back to quilting. What shall we do next, you guys? We have to make a decision. We're either going to do the detailed areas in the dragons or move further down the quilt. And I think I choose to move further down the quilt. Because remember, I took the step at the beginning of outlining my blocks, right? So these are stabilized, every one of these pictures. So I now can roll back and forth with impunity. Like nothing's going to shift or move. So that's what I choose to do. I'm going to roll forward and get to some other interesting bits. I mean, it may be fun for you to watch and we may come back to it, but you basically get the idea. I'm just going to outline some of the dragon bits, right? And maybe add a bit of background texture in these blocks. More fun to get down and see more of the quilt, I think. So that's what we're going to do. I have my chubby red snappers on here, so I'm just moving Stella to the side so I can I have a little more clearance for rolling this forward. If I go about there, I will now be able to baste both sides, do the bottom of this box, and do a couple of these little blocks that are here. That'll be my next pass. Can I get up to my background? Not quite. I'm just going to bring my machine in and see how far I can reach. Make some decisions. I'm going to go a touch forward so I can get that box. And then I'll have to back up a touch when I want to do my fill. All right, first step. First step, students. First step is always baste the perimeter. So I make sure my quilt is pulled down snug. I'm kind of looking along it and judging by the seam lines just to make sure the middle's not, you know, getting that frown in it. And I usually do this hard, this brisk pulling down of it. My edges look nice and straight. I'm going to go ahead and baste the sides with my 1/4 inch basting stitch. This basting, by the way, if it's not something you've done before, one of the beauties of it is I do it within, well within the 1/4 inch seam allowance so that it never has to be undone or trimmed. It just falls right in the seam allowance of the binding when it is fixed. So in some ways, I feel like it gives a little more strength even to the quilt, but certainly you do not ever need to fuss with undoing it. This crystal-y fabric is super hard to see on. All right. How much of that backing can we see? Not very much yet. I'll do one more pass before we get a camera showing that backing. I will not forget that you guys asked for that. Oh, Mr. Producer says he has lots. All right. He's going to move a camera for that, so we can go have a look at that in a moment. Here's one example, by the way, of my hill happens to be on the block side and my ditch happens to be on the background side. It really doesn't matter which way you go. I think this time I'm going to go on the backing side because my thread contrasts more highly with that. That's what my decision came down to, right? So it is not it's not meaningful to life as we know it, right? Just make a decision on one side or the other and do it. I slowed down there because I knew I was going to hit my little clamp. I knew it was coming. There's my little thread tails that I left marking my spot. Trim those away. Okay. Now then, we'll go ahead and put our magnets on while we work here. I think I'll just do 2. I think that's enough. All right, these little boxes, I've been thinking while I've been quilting, I'm going to stick a little piece of blue tape on each one, and I'm just going to do those while I'm doing my background fill, right? I'm going to come up near to them, take a second, buzz around it, and keep on going with the fill, right? There's no need to actually stop and start for them, but it would be all too easy to forget them, so this is what I'm going to do. Right? Boop. Now you can't miss that. You just can't miss that. And these 3, I'm just going to do all at once. See how my ruler bumps up against this nice deep foot? Mr. Producer's phone. I mentioned this at the beginning, but it's worth saying again. This is a critical part of working with rulers, is that you have a foot, even if you're at your domestic sewing machine, they will have ruler feet as well that have this deep profile so that you do not inadvertently bump up over on top of your ruler. That is really, really important. You can quickly do a lot of damage to a machine if you whack a ruler. Oh, it's blue tape time. There's another little box here, but I don't have enough throat space to go around it, so I'm just going to blue tape it, and I'll do that when I do my background too. Look at that, you guys. The next ebook might be 101 uses for painter's tape. I get asked time to time by other quilters or on podcasts or what have you, what's your favorite tool? That's what it always is. Blue painter's tape. That's my ruler squeaking. Sorry about that. Got to get up there and do that edge. Speaking of blue painter's tape and velvety backings, let's actually just stop with needle down. Get my thoughts together here. Stop with needle down. There we go. But speaking of velvety type backings, when I go to trim this quilt for Pauline, I've got that basted edge all the way around it, right? So on the underside of the quilt, I'm going to put blue painter's tape centered, more or less centered, over that seam line all the way around the quilt. Then I'll flip it right side up and trim with my rotary cutter, and all the fluff will stay stuck on here. You're welcome. Everyone who has ever cut a velvety backing in their sewing room and then tried to get it out of their cutting mat knows what I mean. It can be disastrous. I'm just looking if I've done all the boxes. There's one more little one over here to mark with painter's tape, like so. And I think that's all of them for now. So needle is down. Oh, there's this little one, this one here. Okay. Mark that little geezer. Okay, so now I'm going to lift the magnets off and I'm going to back up the quilt just a little bit so that I get to my join with the background that I did before. I can't quite reach it as it stands now. Might have to take my elastic off. It's a couple of inches. I have to feel it. I can't really see it. Have we got it? Oh yeah, that's plenty. Good. This is one of those quilts where I will I will, before I take it off the long arm rails, I'll get another person in here with me and I'll roll the whole thing where you can see the backing and see if there's any areas I missed. And what's making me think of that, I don't know if you remember, but when I started that background fill, I didn't do that little narrow bit on the side. I just went across the top. So I've got this little chunk here, right, that has no background fill in it. So I'm going to try and remember when I'm doing it now to go up there and fill it. But if I were to leave that undone, I want to see that before I unload it off the frame. And sometimes looking at it on the backing is the easiest way, especially with a velvety backing, right? It's so visible if you've missed any areas for quilting. So an easy way to do that is have someone stand on that side and I'll just roll it back and forth and it will come to light quickly if I've missed any important bits. Okay, just got to get organized here. BSR 1, we're in business. I joke sometimes that quilting is about peripheral vision as much as anything, and I think this quilt sort of bears that out. I'm seldom looking at where my needle is. I'm always glancing out in front because I need to know where I'm going next and where I've been. And of course, there's no shame in pausing and looking either, but as much as I can, I'm just keeping a weather eye out. All the time. Where have I been? Where am I going next? Try not to cross any lines of stitching. If you by chance are just tuning in, this is Live and Unscripted, my quilting reality show. I am live streaming this quilting. This is real time, and the whole show will be this way. We do not edit out bits, so you get to see all of it in the actual time that it occurs, and even when there are mistakes, and certainly today when I'm talking out loud through my thoughts and my decisions. So I try to do these about once a month on YouTube, and it is a fun way to get together and chat. You can work on your projects at the same time, but you get to see in real time what machine quilting looks like. So if you want to be notified when the next one is coming up, sign up for my newsletter. There is a link always in the description to do that, and you will get a notification, but also you can do it by subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell so that you receive notifications when I am live. That will not give you advance warning, but that will let you know when I do go live. If you're on my newsletter, then I will typically send out an email a day or two before with a picture of what I'll be working on and some idea of what the topics will be. The thumbs up, though, is very helpful. It does, even if you've watched before and you've given thumbs up before, just the more of those I get, the more YouTube recognizes that and sends this out to more quilters, and I sure do appreciate that. here we are at this trusty little box. This guy's so little we don't even need a ruler. We're just going around him. How much room have I got? A little bit. I'm just wondering, can I get underneath him? But I think I do have enough room to get around there with my feathers. My boomerangs. I think we'll stop right. We can get one more in. Right there. All right, this one is full, so we're starting in this corner. Recently, I've been releasing some additional episodes on YouTube that are not my typical live and unscripted, but instead are planned and pre-recorded. And the one that I released last week was yet another step out of the ordinary, and it was kind of a telling of my story of building my business. So if you're interested in that type of stuff, I won't give you the whole thing now because maybe not everyone is interested in that. But it is a bit remarkable. I'm 50-something, closer to 60 than 50. And when I began building my business, I was already a quilter for a few years, a machine quilter, even a long arm quilter. But the position when we needed to find a paying gig and it was a 9-to-5 or change my hobby was quite sudden. And it was the catalyst for some big changes for Dave and I. And so I told a bit of that story. And part of the story, which I got a number of comments about, was that I said, I'm an introvert. I'm a big-time introvert, and I have certainly never in my whole life been a person who gets on a stage or in front of a camera. Nope, nope, nope. I've always been the person in the background, cooking the meals, etc., homeschooling the kids, whatever the case may be. I got a wonky one there. Anyway, so I told a bit of that story too. And the change and how that change came about, and even what a difference stepping into new things has made in my life and in my headspace, you know? So it was interesting to do. It was a bit vulnerable feeling, a bit like putting some raw skin out there. But I got some really, really sweet and encouraging comments back. So I sure did appreciate that from people. And that's ultimately why I did it, because I thought if I have these feelings about doing new things and venturing into areas that are unknown, then I know others have those feelings too. And maybe this could be an encouragement to them. So that was aired, I think, October 3. So if you want to have a look at that, you're welcome to. Oh, here I am again, cutting off that background that I actually need to fill. Pay attention, Susan. Pay attention. Here we go. We'll go in there and we'll blur the lines. We'll quilt right across that seam and blur the lines. That pause was to decide which way do I want to go, east or west. I'm going to, right in the middle of my boomerang, I'm going to go do these little doodads. Outline them. And I am going to get a ruler because they're, while straight edges, they're not perpendicular to the sides of the quilt. And it can be hard to do an angled edge freehand. So here I am using my ruler. I'm just debating here. There's pros and cons. If I rolled my quilt forward a little bit, I could get right down to this edge. If I don't, I'm going to have a narrow span here to go through. Again, no right or wrong, just pick one. I'm going to choose to leave my quilt where it is and just get out of here and leave a bit wider space down there if I can, or at least a not straight space so that I can wiggle around in there when I come back through. And I hear my bobbin rattling, which tells me I need to give my machine a little drink of oil. So we will shortly pause and do that. Where have we got to go here? Yeah, I think we'll keep going to the edge of the quilt. I'm just going to stick my little tapes on my roll. I can use those again. something I talk about quite a bit in the All Over Feathers course, which, remember, I've said these boomerangs are exactly the same basic formation and thread path and organization, if you will. But one of the things I talk about is not doing left-right alternating. So you're really seeing that here. I am essentially traveling in a straight line along the bottom edge of this block, but I don't want my feather to look like, or my boomerangs to look like they're in a row. So I'm doing 2 on one side and then 2 on the other, so that it's always kind of twisting and turning. That's just a little trick that you can employ to keep your feathers from looking, especially if you're using them as an all-over or a fill like this. You don't want them to visibly look like they're in rows or have straight edges. You want them to look random and natural. And that is one of the ways to do it. I'm using my hand to put a little tension on this edge of the quilt because I just don't have room for my nifty side clamps. But I really need that tension to keep this from puckering a bit. So that's another workaround too. If you have to employ someone else in the family, so be it. Hey, hold the edge of this quilt for me. I'm just going to rewind my quilt a touch so that I can get this little edge, right, that I missed, that I was pointing out earlier. And then we're going to take a break for a minute. I'd love to hear what you guys think of the back of the quilt. Have I made the right design choice for this background fill? And there we are, matched up with what we did before. Perfect. One little tape came off on my arm as I went by. Okay, let's roll forward. Have a peek how far we can go. I did that square. I have to do this one, so I want to get to the bottom of these, hopefully. That should work. That ought to do it. Okay, let's take a moment. I'm going to get a drink of water this time. Mr. Producer was kind enough to run and get me some. That tape's kind of heavy and stretchy. We'll set it off to the side. Okay, drink of water. Let's chat, and I will move Stella to the side.
I don't have a lot of questions.
Not many questions? Okay, and how are we doing for time?
We've been on for an hour 43.
Yeah, just about winding down. I'm not to the nest of eggs yet. I should have loaded the quilt upside down, but maybe I'll roll forward and just show you them, and we'll chat about that for a second, because I don't know that I'll get to them quilting. Luda, what approximate size of these boomerangs and space between them? Gosh, I would say the biggest ones are about 1.5 inches wide. Maybe the odd one stretches a bit longer as I'm stretching it out into corners. You know, and there's 1/4 inch-ish between them. Of course, they're connected at the base like a feather would be, but at the outer edge there's a little space between them. So that gives you some idea of it. Did you show the background or the backing already, Dave?
Yeah, I can do it again though. Here.
Maybe we do that and I'll put my hand on it, and then that will give you a bit of a judge. excuse me, a little bit of a scale to see what, oh, that's not working well.
Nope.
Have we,
Fix that. It's just working.
that's the way it goes sometimes. Silly camera. Takes,
Talk and I'll fix this.
okay, Mr. Producer says keep talking. Okay, let me do a rundown again, just in case you're just joining. Some of my favorite tools are at play today. My straight ruler from Jamie Wallen of Quilter's Apothecary. These come in different sizes. My particular personal favorite is the 8-inch. What I love is the angled handle that allows me to handle it, you know, in all sorts of ways and reduce hand fatigue. I particularly do not care for rulers that have no handle at all, that you just hold in place by pressure. This quilt doesn't have much ruler work, but if you're doing a ton, that can get quite fatiguing quite quickly on your hand. So love these rulers for that. There's a link in my description. I think it's attached to all my episodes because Jamie offers a discount. And what else? We're doing this quilt with no batting layer in between. So it's just the fluffy Minky type. This is Cuddle brand, velvety backing, and then this top. So whenever Dave gets the camera going, you'll see the stitching shows up beautifully on the back of it. So it's going to be really interesting looking on the back. So in general, my big picture idea is I'm framing, in other words, I'm stitching a straight line in the ditch around each of these pictures and blocks so that on the back you do have that interest. And then I will come back and outline the main figure in them. And if there's a lot of space, I'll add a little bit of details in the background. Between them all, no matter what the fabric is, maybe you want the bigger camera for a sec, Dave, if you can do that quickly while you're working. Because I'm pointing out stuff with my hand and you guys can't see that.
2 seconds.
He's thinking. He's thinking.
I am.
There we go. The fills between, though these are different fabrics, yet they're getting the same boomerang pointy feathers fill. So the blocks are outlined. The whatever feature is in them, whether it's a wizard or a dragon or a gold chest, is going to get outlined and possibly some background details, and then this boomerang fill in and around all of them. Okay, we can almost see it on here, but not quite.
You know what? If you give me a moment.
That might be the easier, is to just zoom that camera in so that it shows, and it will give you an idea of the scale of my little boomerangs.
We're just got to be okay with moving.
Can you guys see that? I'll let this go back a little so we see this area right here. Can you see the boomerangs there and see the...
Faster here.
There we go. That gives you a bit of an idea for scale. There you go. So yeah, these big areas that are the blocks will get more detail in them for sure. But I can roll my quilt back and forth a bit because the blocks are outlined. Okay, our wider view again. Thanks. Because the blocks are outlined and therefore are stable, and I'm doing that, you know, as I advance the quilt. So that will be my next step in this area, right, is to outline each of these blocks, and that sort of stabilizes everything. Another option certainly would be to just run lines of basting across the quilt. That would work too, but I don't need to. Then I don't have to come back and undo that, right, if I just use the outlines of the blocks. So that's how I've been doing it. I'm using 100% poly 40 weight teal colored thread on the top and an 80 weight teal colored thread on the bottom. And that's okay. Let's do some questions. That's the summary of what we're doing. Bigger picture, hun. There we go. Leslie, how you can quilt and talk at the same time amazes me. Been doing it for a long time, Leslie. I could just about quilt with one hand tied behind my back. I can have a book in my ears, but I can't talk. I do that thing too. And sometimes that's worse for me because I get in the story and then... Carol Joy, your friend Pauline did a marvelous job on the material selection. Is she going to call this the Dragon's Lair? Honestly, I don't know, but I know it's going to her grandson, who's like high school graduate age. So perhaps he's naming it. I just lost my picture, Dave.
Oops. Sorry.
Hopefully that's not everyone.
Yeah, it is.
Oops. Sorry about that. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Luda, when I quilt, I can't talk to anyone since it takes my mind away, but I'm talking to my quilt and my machine about my steps, and it seems to help. You're not the first, Luda. Often when I'm teaching edge-to-edge designs that are quite repetitive, like getting round loops, students have said it's helpful to them to like talk through a mantra, you know, make it round, or up and then swoop, up and then swoop. So that's not new. And certainly if that is helpful, that's a really valuable technique. It is.
And that's all I got for now.
Okay, that's it on those. All right.
Oh, one more.
One more. Carol, don't forget to oil. Thank you for that. You are a trooper. This is why this is why I count on you guys. Don't forget to oil. That is important to get rid of that squeakiness and rattle. And I did oil before I began this morning, but sometimes if, you know, when it's been sitting overnight or a couple of days and my machine has been sitting for, I think, 2 days without quilting, sometimes it takes an oil or 2 or 3 to get it well lubricated. And I like to put it in more often and little than a lot, you know, which is apt to leak oil in places I don't want it to be. We don't want that. Okay, I've done that little blue one. We can put that on the tape. I'm just looking because I kind of have to get in here and look to see what's been quilted and what hasn't. Next step is basting the sides, though. I do know that much. My bobbin thread is, oh, there we go. It's pulling kind of hard. This, you guys, got to talk about this. This is an interesting conundrum. A lot of people will ask me, do you check your bobbin tension, like on your TOA gauge with every bobbin change or between halfway through a bobbin? And I typically don't. But having quilted a lot, I know so much what this should feel like. And I can tell you right now, pulling on that thread, it feels too tight. So now let's see if I'm right, you guys. Let me get out my TOA gauge and put it on there. I've done this lots of times, checked myself, and I'm pretty consistently right. I know what that should feel like. It is. It's 300, way too tight. So the first thing I'm going to do is reseat the bobbin, right? Because I haven't changed the tension and it was good a little bit ago. So let's just rethread it and see if it's just, that's better already, although I think still too tight. But that's my first step. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I've talked many times, and in fact I have a little series of tiny short videos on YouTube about knowing your machine. The more that you quilt or sew at your sewing machine, and the more that you get to know it, the less problems you seem to have. And part of it is just because you know what's right, like if the sound is off, right? Or if the feel is off, and you just fix things quicker, remedy things quicker. So I'm a great believer in that, knowing your machine. And there's no shortcut to that. It's just a matter of doing it. Mr. Producer's miming questions at me.
Saving at the other camera.
Okay, this bobbin is super tight. So what I'm going to do, this is my cheat, but I will tell you guys my cheat so you can do it too. I'm going to put a different bobbin casing on it. I don't know why that should make a difference, but it often does. I have 2 bobbin casings and I use them both on the regular. I'm sure there's no science behind that, but it works. And right away, that feels totally different. Totally different. That one even is a bit light. So let's tighten that a touch because this is my fine thread, right? Touch more. Come on now. Better. All right. Now we'll gather up the thread tails before we stitch them in. Let's see if that feels right. If I close my eyes and feel it, does it feel right? It does. Good. So I'm sorry to say I don't know the reason why all of a sudden that was feeling tight, but I noticed that it felt not right. So when that happens, I don't just doggedly keep going. I stop and assess. There's another question apparently. What tension settings do you have, top and bobbin both? Ah, super question. I typically go for 210 to 220 on the TOA gauge, in that range. This is what is recommended by Bernina machines, by the manufacturer, and I think that's fairly common across manufacturers. Worth checking your manual for that. And on the top right now, I've got mine at 3.5. 4 is the default on the Berninas, and I often fiddle with that just a little bit to get a pretty stitch. 3.5 to 4.5 is kind of my range too. And I always start, I'm giving you guys part of the workshop. I always start by getting my bobbin dialed in at my long arm anyways. I don't change my bobbin very often at my sewing machine, but at my long arm I start by getting the bobbin dialed in, and then I make fine adjustments on the top. I never make great sweeping adjustments at the top before I'm sure the bobbin is doing what it oughta. Okay, basting stitch. And now that I have kind of fiddled with that and make adjustments, I will be watching when I start stitching. How is it looking? How's the thread laying on the surface of the quilt? Just to make sure that I've got it dialed in now. And again, that's a little bit part of knowing your machine. I know what a stitch should look like laying on the surface of the fabric, and it's pretty rare that terrible tension gets by me anymore. I mentioned earlier that I put my ruler plate on because I'm doing some ruler work around these blocks. So another advantage to working my way down the quilt, just outlining the blocks and basting the edges, is that I could then pop this off and I've got a broader quilting space available, right? Because I've lost about 3 inches of throat space. So it's, again, it's not a right or wrong. It's strictly personal preference, but that is one reason why you might choose to work all the way down the quilt, basting these blocks, basting the edges, and then come back and do all the fill. As you got that bigger throat space then. Oh, we're still on a basting stitch, aren't we? Yep. So here's the plan. I'll outline a few of these blocks and give you one last opportunity, if indeed you do have any questions, to ask them, or comments, or what have you. And then I think we'll call it for today. We're at about the 2-hour mark then, and that's kind of what I promised you at the beginning. Nothing is massively going to change from here on out. I will roll the quilt forward for a second and show you the dinosaur eggs that I talked about, and talk just a smidge about my thoughts for those. I'm not sure if you can see this on camera, but right up here, I've got a little bit of fullness. And probably that was me, honestly, nudging fabric. It was nudging forward under my ruler. I think it's enough. I can take that up in my boomerang shapes, right? But this is a case where it's good to pause for a second and evaluate that. Because if there was enough there that I thought it was going to make a pleat, now would be the time to just undo this straight side that I just put in and make a little more fabric ease in that. Does that make sense? So that awareness and kind of looking ahead can save you a lot of terrible headaches in the future. And that certainly is one of the things you need to be aware of when you're using a super stretchy backing like Minky. Because it is so stretchy, like just when I'm moving with my ruler on my plate, it's pulling. And I just have to be managing that all the time. And be aware, if it gets out of place, don't let it keep just adding up and increasing and building up. Just stop and take action if you need to. here I need to make a wee decision. This is actually all one piece of fabric. Although visually it looks like a block and a fill, I think I am going to treat them all as one because I don't think I can get my little boomerangs in there. So I think I'll treat them as one, and I'll stitch around, you know, the wizards and what have you in the blocks. And I'll probably come in here and stitch around these bricks just to add one more texture and a fun bit of interest. But meantime, I'm going to go around the ginormous block with my outline stitch. Talking about easing fabric, I can see that this is building up a bit of excess here. And here's one of the ways I deal with it. I literally pull it toward my needle and get my ruler on it. I don't know if you can see, but behind my presser foot, there's a bulge. I am literally going to be easing that under my needle, and I'm doing that intentionally. I don't want to push it out flat ahead. I want to get that eased under there. And that's one of the ways I manage. When I see this fullness coming, I'm like, I got to get on top of that and manage it. Here again, and maybe you can see it better. Just zhuzh it over toward that needle, put your ruler right on it, and you can see there's a bit of bulginess going on, but keep a little pressure on it, and it will force it to be taken up in your stitches as you go across. Reset your ruler and do it again. Literally pulling it back against the needle. Those of us who have done garment sewing are totally familiar with easing fabric, and in fact, many of us who piece quilts are familiar with easing fabric. This is just how you do it at the long arm. I'm just going to go across the top of this little one. I'll have to do the bottom of it later. Did I go around this one? Yes, I did. So I have joined up there. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to forward and show you guys the little dinosaur eggs. They're so cute. Because I think we're very nearly at our 2 hours. Okay, we've got the close-up view on, yeah? We should for a minute. There we go. Okay, check these out. These are they're fussy cut. They're individual pieces of fabric. And, you know, Pauline had choices too when she was piecing this. An option would have been to cut it out and applique it, but she didn't. There's no applique elsewhere on the quilt, and she just chose instead to cut them. So each of them is a different shape. You can see all the multiple seam lines in there, and she just built this block with these eggs. So my idea quilting-wise is we want this to look like a nest. So I'm going to chalk in a circle, perhaps even 2 circles, one about an inch bigger than the other, and I'm going to outline each of these egg blocks, and between, instead of quilting my fill, my boomerang fill, I'm going to quilt squiggly lines that look like twigs, right? And kind of make it round-ish to look like there's a nest of twigs and leaves and string and what have you under those eggs. So we'll see how it turns out. I'll post pictures for you guys. How's that? By the way, isn't it clever that YouTube lets us post pictures now? I love doing that, posting multiple set of pictures, because I seldom finish the project while we're on air, and you guys always want to see the finished project. Of course you do. And it takes me a day or 2 to finish it and then get some good lighting and get pictures and what have you. And I used to have to go and post them elsewhere on social media and say, actually, these are for the thing I did over there on YouTube. But now I can put them right on YouTube. It's lovely. Okay. Any more questions or thoughts about this process? It's been a fun one. It's going to be a gorgeous quilt. Carol, do you find that on the edges with your Minky, if you're just trying to pull it that little bit tighter, that it does bubble underneath your top when the stretch is removed? How do you deal with it? My pull is pretty gentle, Carol. I'm not sure if you go by Carol or Carol Joy. So I talked about this early on when I was putting my side clamps on and when I was even choosing the orientation of my cuddle fabric. The bulk of stretch, as I've got it loaded now, is forward to back. So I can control that that really stretchy area by how tight my rails are. And they're not very tight. My quilt is actually sagging a little bit. I don't want any overstretch on that. Then my low stretch is from side to side so that I can put a little tension on those side edges to keep wrinkles from forming. But in either direction, I never want to put so much tension that when I release it, it has distorted my stretchy fabric, right? So that's just something I'm really conscious of when I use Minky or Cuddle or anything velvety, super stretchy. Fleece, this would apply to. When you overstretch it so much that it relaxes back, like more than half an inch when you're done quilting, that's when you run into that funny distortion and your quilt won't lay flat, and maybe your quilt even has ripples because your top fabric is being pulled in by the tension that was on that back fabric. So that's kind of how I think of it. I think don't be scared of velvety fabrics. Maybe do your first one or two with something that's not hyper precious, like your first grandbaby's, heirloom quilt. But as soon as you get the feel for it, I think the top key is to get that feel, like to experiment and be thoughtful. How much is this stretched? And if I back off my rails a little bit, does it still stay flat? Like mine are backed off to the point where my quilt is just starting to have droop. Any more and I'm apt to get wrinkles, but any tighter and I'm stretching it, right? Does that all make sense? I think just the awareness is the key, and not just treating it like you would a cotton as vigorously. More? That's it. All right, you guys, this has been fun. As always, this is a live and unscripted show, so it's being streamed in real time. If you're catching this as a replay, know that the original episode's real time. It's a reality show, and I love doing these. It's an opportunity for us to get together, chat while we're working. Often viewers are working on their own thing, and I'm chatting through my processes as I go. I love to hear your feedback and comments on it. It's encouraging for me, and it also lets me know what you're most interested in seeing coming up. So for today, this is date sensitive. Next Tuesday, October 14 of 2025, I'm hosting a workshop that I call Stitch Clinic. And it's all about the factors that go into forming beautiful stitches, how to diagnose what's wrong when you're getting ugly ones, and multiple fixes. And then finally, a few ways that you can preempt that you can avoid some of those problems by doing good setup and planning in the first place. So that workshop, there's a link to it. Dave's put it in the chat, and I will put it in the description below too. And it's also on all my social media posts if you're watching this in the next day or 2 or 3. I would love to see you there. It will be aired live, and it's an hour jam-packed of information, and then there's a bonus Q&A that comes after it. If you want more details on that, read the sales page about it and you can get more details. I sure appreciate you all joining me. This is just such a pleasure to get together with other quilters and do our favorite thing, more or less, in a room together. So thanks so much for joining me, and I will catch up with you next time.